I finally got my new intake manifold in. It's just a cheap RPM air gap knockoff. It's hollow underneath. So that's about, I mean, I have about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. So it's not very much. This is the water jacket. Not very much leeway there. I just don't know what's wrong with Fel-Pro, why two different heads, you know, obviously stock and an aftermarket head. And neither one of them fit with their 1250 gasket. They say it's going to fit for 289s, 302s, 260s, whatever. It's just pain. So I just want to do a quick comparison between the Fel-Pro 1250 gasket, intake manifold gasket for the Ford small block. This is a 1250 S3. As far as I know, it's the same as the 1250. It's just stiffer maybe. Thickness might be a little different, but dimensionally should be the same. Compare that to the Fel-Pro 90103-1. Both of these Fel-Pro says will fit a 289, but I've had problems with this one in the past. When you line this up with the intake ports, this edge of the water jacket is flush with the edge of the block. So essentially you have zero overlap with the gasket right here, and you have no seal. So if you go with the other gasket, the Fel-Pro gasket, you can see it's a little smaller opening there. You'll have a little more overlap. So I taped these two together just to see. You can see the differences in size and location. So about 1.18. And they're very close in height, but you can see here, if I make the top flush, you can see there's some overlap on the bottom. So the 90103 gasket is slightly taller, not much. I think it's just a few 6,000ths maybe. It's not very much at all. And the 90103 has the crossover port, which the other one doesn't. I'm not using it because neither my manifold or my heads have that. And if we flip it over, you can see a big difference in the water jacket sizing. It appears the 90103 water jacket opening is actually a little bit higher, but it's much closer in towards the intake port. So here I drew a line where my intake manifold lines up, and I only have about 1/8 of an inch overlap. Now this isn't a stock intake manifold. That's the one sitting right here, but I only have that much overlap with this bigger gasket, the bigger port. And you see, I didn't draw the line on here, but I would probably have about 1/4 inch of overlap with that other gasket. So much safer with that. All right, I'm going to show you the bulb holes for the intake manifold. And you can see just about every single one of the interior ones go through into the valley. So they definitely need to be sealed. These outer ones, the outer ones don't. They appear to be blind holes. So I'll probably just put sealant on all of them just so that I don't get any seizing between the aluminum. All right, I placed my new gaskets. This is the MS 90103-1 Fel-Pro gasket. I've lined it up. It's almost flush all the way around every one of these ports. They really match up well with these ProMAXX heads. So I've taped that on there, both sides. And what I want to do is set my intake manifold on. I've got my carb studs, one in each corner, to help me line this up. Really comes in handy. Just gonna set it down gentle. I don't want to knock these manifold gaskets anywhere. And what I'm doing is trying to line it up so that the studs appear to be centered in the hole. That way I'm pretty sure that the manifold is sitting down. Okay. So I don't have a lot of the gasket sticking out for me to mark. It's almost flush right on the end, which is nice. Maybe I can use that. Same thing on the back. So I guess what I can do is use a Sharpie and draw a line across there to mark it since it's flush. And same thing here. On the other side, just draw a Sharpie line there. That way when I take it off, I can tape them back on. Tape the gasket to the manifold, match up that Sharpie line, and then I can flip it over and see how it looks. Let's do that. I flipped my manifold over, lined up these gaskets there with the, I don't know if you can see it, my little Sharpie mark right there. So I did that on both sides. So that's lined up, and I taped it down. I'm pretty much flush on the left of all the ports. So do have a lot more extra space on the top especially. And on the other side, I'm pretty much flush on the right side, just my perspective here. So I can't shift the manifold to the front or the back to try to help the ports. Centering it on the stud, those four corner studs, seems to be the best thing. I looked at how these ports are, the width. Is it going to be worth porting these things? And I set this for the pretty much the widest opening here. It's hitting at the top and the bottom because it does taper slightly. And it's very consistent until I get it back about 1.5 to 2 inches, and then it widens up. So it's very wide. Every one of them is like that. So it's very close in the front. And then move back about 2 inches, and it gets a lot wider. So even the end ones are that way too. So I have a lot of width. The problem is the height. So if I set this at my opening height, I can't really get too far back in there before I'm touching. So you can see I have to tilt it to get it in there. So I was thinking I could just open this up here, but I'd have to go so far back in there. I mean, as far as I could reach with this thing, it's stuck. I can't even straighten it out. I don't know if you can see it. So I just don't have the capability of porting way in there. I mean, I can open this up with a Dremel, but not 4 inches back in there. And you'd probably have to port it all the way to where the carb goes. So I'm just gonna leave it the way it is. So everything else lines up great. So it's good enough for now. If I have to later on, I can always take it off and port it. But I'd probably have to buy a die grinder. I have an air compressor and a pneumatic die grinder, but my compressor's so small it dies. You know, I mean, it doesn't die, but it's constantly running and it's just gonna burn up. Just to give you an idea of the port size on here. So I'm measuring about 1.86. The RPM air gap measures 1.85. And this is 108. Yeah. 109. So it's almost the exact same size as the RPM air gap for half the price. I have no idea what the inside looks like, you know, how more efficient that is, but. Right. I put a seal of Ultra Black around the water jackets on the head side of the gasket. I've already put this one on and I'm taping it in place so it doesn't slide on me. And then I'm gonna set the intake manifold on there and torque it down. And then I can come back after this sets up. It's gonna seal right around here. This gasket will be stuck to the head, so I can take the intake back off and then seal around the other side so the gasket will not shift. Okay, I set my manifold in place. I tried to line up the left and right as well as I could with the studs. That's where I marked it originally, and it looks pretty close. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just put my intake bolts in there. There's, I don't know, 10 of them, 12 of them. Torque them down. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like that. 9, 10, yeah, something like that. Anyway, I'm going to torque it down, let it sit overnight, and then tomorrow when I take the manifold back off, my gasket will be stuck to the head, so I know it's not going to shift on me. Okay, I let my gaskets sit overnight, pulled my intake off, and then I sealed around on the intake side, ran a bead along both china rails, throw those cork gaskets out, and I sealed around there. Make sure you get it really good in these corners because the head gasket's in there and there's a little teeny gap in there, you know. So cleaned off my surfaces really good, so let's drop it on. Just trying to drop it down as even as I can. And I don't want to move it around too much. I'm trying to make sure it's centered on my studs. Okay, looks pretty good. Before I torque it down, I want to check to make sure that I'm getting a good seal on my china rail. Because it's not going to compress down much more than it is now. So looks to be good. When I torque it down, I think I'm good. Okay, I'm putting my thread sealant on there. It's basically liquid Teflon tape, I guess. I'm just dropping these in there. Just doing them hand tight for now. I'll get them all in and then start torquing them. It's going to take a lot of torquing because it settles down real slow, so you got to do each one like 5 times. Let me take all these out. So I also put in my plugs in there. These are the water jacket plug, and I put this sealant around there. And there's that's for a vacuum port, which I don't use. That's also a vacuum port, don't use, or a EGR. So, and then I got this crossover water jacket, which is nice because I need the water temp in the back. Otherwise, I'd have to plug it in front and run a wire back. I had to look up the torque pattern because I had it kind of backwards. So there you can kind of see. So start with number 1. Either side is fine, but I'm the second bolt back from the front. So 1, then a big X. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go to the outside. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then go back to the middle. 9, 10, 11, 12, or, you know, just as long as you start here. So you start at the second bolts from the ends. So an X there, go to the front, go to the back, and then an X in the middle. Easy peasy. I'm just doing 10 foot-pounds first. $12, $14, $16, $18 on my cheapo. There.